Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Welcome to ISoc Hotseat. Ustadh Asif Uddin, this is the first time we've had you at Imperial.
No, I've been here a few times actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been at Imperial 5 years and I haven't seen you
I
yet.
actually gave some circles around maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Giving you weekly circles.
Okay, fine, that makes sense then. That makes sense. Fine.
Before your time.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your talk today on Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Now, if there was one message that you'd like the audience to take away from the talk, what would it be?
I mean, when we look and analyse the life of Nuh alayhi salam and the fact that he gave da'wah to his people for 950 years, and only a handful of people came forward and they embraced Islam and embraced his message.
Yes.
The greatest thing that we take from his story is not to give up. Never give up when it comes to da'wah. Just be persistent, have perseverance in giving da'wah. And this is what he was known for. He was known for giving da'wah in different ways, whether it is calling people openly, or calling people secretly, or calling people individually or as groups. He'll be doing this, exhausting all of the means of giving da'wah. So I think that a person should never feel that, you know what, I'm going to give up on this person, because guidance is with Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to know how far you as an individual will go and call people to what is pleasing to him.
Fine, so the main message was about da'wah and never giving up. So now say people, they want to get involved in da'wah, where do they begin?
I think people have a common misconception when it comes to giving da'wah. They believe that da'wah is simply giving talks, giving circles, giving khutbahs, but da'wah is far more reaching. There's so many ways of giving da'wah. A person can get involved in an Islamic society, a person can get involved in an organization, a person can get involved in masjids. A person may not be a very good public speaker, but any skills that they can bring forward, they can actually utilize. So for instance, someone who's very good at designing, graphic design as an example, they can always make posters for their masjids, for the ISocs. They can make like clips, documentaries. There are so many, alhamdulillah, if you can imagine in the past, the scope of da'wah was quite a lot smaller than it is today. So for instance, someone giving a talk and then you have to get someone to organize it and so on and so forth. That was the most that you could probably do, maybe transcribing some lectures, making it into a book and then publishing it. So the scope of that was quite limited. But now, alhamdulillah, due to the technology era that we live in, it's unbelievable, that every single year you're finding a different way of giving da'wah. It's just about a person just contributing the skill that they have in facilitating.
Okay, I understand. Now, in the Quran we have some very serious ayat about Nuh and his son, his relationship with his son. Now his son, he never became Muslim in the end. And right up until the last moment, Nuh was continually giving da'wah to him. So are there any general tips, whether it's from the story of Nuh or general tips about from other prophets, how we should deal with family members who may not be Muslim?
Sure. So, what we find unique about Nuh alayhi salam, and we only find him and Ibrahim alayhi salam, as far as I know, they're the only two prophets who actually made dua for their parents in the Quran. Not to say that the other prophets didn't, but it's clearly mentioned that they did. And it shows that they had a lot of concern for their parents. What we can do in terms of bringing people who are close to us, whether they're our parents, we may have parents who are non-Muslim, we may have parents who do not pray 5 times a day, we may have siblings, brothers and sisters who do not pray, who may not be Muslim. The best thing to do is to really find ways that you feel that you can possibly change them. I mean, whenever people give da'wah, there are two elements of da'wah. There's one element of the raw information, what we are giving, what we are going to tell people, the mad'u, the one that you're calling to da'wah, what you're going to tell them. And a lot of da'wah courses are really about this. But there's another element of da'wah as well, and this is also very, very important, and that's the social element as well. So I can give you an example. There's one person that I know who was willing to become a Muslim, but the only problem with them becoming Muslim is that they were very scared of becoming Muslim. They were worried what their parents will say. They were worried what their family and the people around them will actually say. So it's facilitating the social environment in which they can become a Muslim, and for them to be for it to be easier for them to become Muslim under such an environment. And sometimes just by a person changing themselves. So for instance, if you find that a mother and a father are very upset with their child, or they don't like certain characteristics about their child, as an example, maybe they doesn't clean the room or doesn't help out around the house. If a person changes their character and they change the way that they are with their parents, they're showing them more kindness, they're taking them around to meet their brothers and their sisters and uncle and aunts and so on and so forth, and they notice a real change taking place in that person, and then they connect that to Islam, then this will for sure open their hearts, and it will make them feel, Alhamdulillah, my son has become a better son, my daughter has become a better daughter. Why have they become a better daughter? Why have they become a better son? Is because they have come closer to Allah. And also, everyone goes through difficulties. Everyone goes through problems. You're always going to find someone who has, who have lost a beloved. That they're going through problems. Maybe there's a person is going through problems in terms of unemployment, or a person is having problems at work. Whatever the case is, naturally human beings have problems. So they are always looking for solutions. They're always looking for some kind of ease for the pain that they're going through. And we as Muslims, we as those people who maybe are trying to become better Muslims, we should really offer that solution. We should really offer that way of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just as we found in Surah Nuh, where Nuh alayhi salam was enticing his people to seek forgiveness of Allah, and the way that he was enticing them to do this is that if you seek forgiveness of Allah, then what will happen? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will He'll open up the heavens and He will give you rain, and then He will give you children, He'll give you wealth, He'll give you gardens. So we should also use that as a mechanism to bring people closer to Islam.
Fine. So we talked about family members. What about colleagues? Now, with colleagues, you need to maintain a working relationship, maintain good relations. At the same time, when you start giving them da'wah, you're essentially telling them, so how do you balance?
This is actually quite difficult because, as you said, we need to have a working relationship with our colleagues, and we're going to be there for some time, and we may even be reported by them from the manager. And there's been a number of cases where even some nurses have said to their patients, Christian nurses have said to their patients that I will pray for you, and then the patients have actually complained about them. So obviously we have to be professional in that environment, but of course we have to call people wherever we are to Islam. So how do we do that? I find that having worked with non-Muslims for a number of years, I find that it's very difficult to give da'wah in the same to non-Muslims colleagues in a company or in that professional environment in the same way that you give da'wah in other spheres. For instance, when you're giving street da'wah or when you're giving da'wah at university as a student, it's very different. Because sometimes you're going to be perceived as some kind of nutcase. That's how they will see you. So what I would actually suggest is that by nature human beings are very intrigued. They're very curious creatures. The way that I actually, what I would recommend is to build up some kind of rapport and some kind of relationship where you are able to get into discussions. And then by having these discussions, try to get them to ask you questions. And by them asking you questions, you're able to get in. It's less, less intrusive, and so it's easier to get in that conversation. So, for instance, just talking from my own experience, I had, I think I was the only Muslim in my department, and everyone else was non-Muslim, and you know, they were really interested. They were really interested in Islam. Islam was always in the headlines. And I feel that is really important, that we don't feel embarrassed, or we don't have confidence in our Islam. So we shouldn't feel embarrassed, example, to ask about a place that we can pray. We shouldn't feel embarrassed to take off some time in order to go for Jum'ah, as an example. We shouldn't, you know, there are so many things that we can do to spark up a conversation, whether it is the fact that, you know, I'm fasting today, it's Ramadan, or, you know, you could be very, on Fridays you can give like some presents and give some, you know, like bring a cake in or something. They say, why is it that you only bring it on Friday? Is it because it's the weekend? No, because Friday's a blessed day, and, you know, I just want, you know, it's a day of enjoyment and so on and so forth. And even when Eid happens, you know, it's all about making small steps in order to bring about, spark some type of conversation whereby you can actually do this, and then you can take it to the next step once you have a you know, a more comfortable relationship in this sphere, and then you can invite them to talks. You can give them you can give them lectures. You can for them to listen at home. You can give them books and pamphlets just about Islam, and that's how it all begins. It's all about creating a relationship and a good rapport by facilitating the process of da'wah.
If I may add a point to that, just from my own experience, often I would keep the fact that I was Muslim quiet, just for a couple of weeks. You know, you're in a new group, new kind of discussion. And then within a couple of weeks, if the topic comes up, everyone knows that you're Muslim. It's very difficult to even hide it, even if you wanted to.
Agreed.
When you have to pray, they notice, where are you leaving? Why are you coming late to the lecture hall? Why do you look a little bit wet? It's these little kind of questions. Okay, why don't you swear? Why don't you engage in this kind of activity? You don't have a boyfriend, girlfriend. Even if you wanted to, you can't hide the fact that you're Muslim. Just another interesting point to add. Okay, so moving away from da'wah, let's talk about yourself. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey in studying Islam?
Sure. So my journey of Islam, how did it start? Well, first of all, alhamdulillah, I came from a family that really encouraged me to pray. So they would always, my parents, alhamdulillah, they pray, my family, my brothers and sisters, they all pray, alhamdulillah. And we were always brought up from a very young age to pray. And they would always ask me, you know, have you prayed? And so we were brought up on that way. But that doesn't mean that you would always like necessarily pray. Sometimes you would, when you're going outside, you probably leave it, and so on and so forth. So I think my journey really began when I was going through a number of problems at college, and then I felt that the only recourse I had is just to, you know, beg Allah. I really needed Allah's help at that point. And then naturally, when you have to pray and you're at college, you need to find a place to pray. And then, you know, I found the prayer room. I started to, you know, attend Jum'ahs, the Friday prayers, and then naturally you meet people and you form friendships. And that's how it all started. So when I went to university, it was like a clean slate. I didn't have to hang around with the type of people that I was hanging around with at college, and so I could choose who I wanted to, you know, hang around with. And in terms of, you know, I was always interested in knowledge, and I was always interested in going to circles and listening to talks and attending the lessons of scholars and so on and so forth. But I was involved in da'wah in the Islamic societies at universities, and I was in a particular university, Brunel in fact, and Brunel is actually quite far away from civilization, and just to bring someone to give talks there was a bit of a problem. Not everyone was willing to journey so far, even though it's not that far.
It's West London.
It's in Uxbridge. So it's in West London, but it's not close to central London. So one time I invited someone to give a talk, and unfortunately they weren't able to make it. Then I started ringing up everyone that I knew. No one else was willing to come. So then I didn't want to cancel the talk, so I just ended up giving the talk myself. And then that role snowballed into you know, giving Jum'ah khutbahs at the university,
Yes.
and then I find myself giving talks at other universities, giving circles, and then I studied abroad. I went to Mauritania, Egypt, and Qatar, and
Yeah.
studied with a few scholars, studied a few books, and that's an ongoing journey. So that's how it all really began.
Fine, I understand. Now, are there any books or resources or courses that you yourself are involved in that you would wish to advertise?
I mean, there's one course that I'm doing at the moment, and I feel very passionate about it.
Yes.
One thing that I really enjoy is Quranic studies, and anything related to the Quran, whether it be the tafsir of the Quran or whether it be the different elements of Quranic studies from a Islamic perspective or from a Western academic perspective. So I like to read up what the Islamic scholars have written about Islam and the Quran, and I'm also very interested in reading books written by Orientalists, by revisionists, and also those Western academics who are sympathetic to Islam. And what I found by interacting with people is that there's a real disconnect with the Quran. A lot of people don't know the book that they claim to love. So if I were to ask a very simple question to, just an ordinary Muslim, even those people who you could class as practicing Muslims, tell me, the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam when he destroyed all the idols. Which surah, which chapter is that in? Many people probably wouldn't be able to answer this. And this really shows us how far away we are from the Quran. So a few years ago, around maybe 2011, 2012, maybe earlier than that, in fact, I was trying to devise a course where you're able to look at the Quran from a macro level. So I believe that the Quran when we tend to study the Quran, we do it in actual fact in an advanced manner. Excuse me. So what I mean by an advanced manner is that when we go to a lesson of tafsir, we study one verse after another verse after another verse.
Yes.
But what we're doing is that we're looking at the Quran in depth.
Yes.
But what we're not looking at is the whole bigger picture. We're looking at the Quran from a micro level, but not from a macro level. And whenever we study any science, we tend to study it from a macro level first. For instance, we have books on the short introductions to Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism, and then once we actually read an introduction of what the book is about or what the science is about, then we can go into detail. So alhamdulillah, I've devised a course where I'm looking at the Quran from a macro level, and I teach this over 2 weekends. So I need about maybe 24, 25 hours to deliver this course, covering each surah from the Quran, from Surah Al-Fatiha all the way to Surah Al-Nas. And in actual fact, whilst I was doing this, I actually attended another course that does something similar. But what I found, unfortunately, is that I just felt that the notes were fantastic, but I just felt that they were just going through the motions in terms of, okay, this is the name of the surah, this is how the surah can be divided, and so on and so forth. But I felt that if you were to ask any of the students, tell me what the first 10 surahs are about, they probably won't be able to tell you. So again, I had to think of a way of people being able to not just go through a course and just be like a course junkie and just attend it for the Imam boost, but really be able to use the Quran as a excuse me, as a way that it is an important resource for a person in their daily life.
Yes.
So there's a very interesting theory, and it's a very predominant theory amongst many of the scholars, that they say that each surah has an aim, it has a maqsad. So each of the stories that are in that surah revolve around that aim. So for instance, once we actually know what the aim of the surah of the Quran is, then we're able to utilize the Quran in the best way. So for instance, if someone is going through problems in their life, which surah do they go to? If you know the aim, you can go to it. And alhamdulillah, I'm teaching this in various masjids. I'm currently teaching this at SOAS, but on a weekly basis. I'll be covering this course in a few masjids, one in Croydon and one in perhaps in Holloway as well, inshallah.
Excellent. Fine. So are there any final words that you have?
No final words, but what I would say is for a person just to be connected to the Quran as much as possible, because this is these are the words of Allah. When the prophets, some of the companions, they would read the Quran, they felt that this was like revelation coming upon them, and except that that they are not a prophet. And once we have a really strong relationship with the Quran, we are able to see that we'll have a strong relationship with Allah, and we will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up our hearts and our thoughts, coming closer to Him, and the Quran, we will really be able to, and really we shouldn't be just reading the Quran, but we should be trying to understand the Quran, and we should be trying to ponder over the Quran. We should try to implement the Quran as much as possible.
Jazakallah khairan, Ustadh Asif Uddin. You survived the ISoc Hotseat. So Jazakallah khairan for your talk and your time afterwards.
Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.